When I was 17, my aunt, uncle, and cousins went away for a long weekend upstate. They asked me to house sit and dog sit their dog, a tiny, fluffy Havanese named Luna. I was thrilled. Not only would they pay me well, but their house was a veritable palace of entertainment. They had a giant TV, a home theater, a gaming room, and a pool. Luna was a calm, low-maintenance dog, the perfect companion. My job was simple: feed her twice a day and let her out in the fenced backyard. Luna was incredibly affectionate and attached. She followed me from room to room like a tiny, white shadow. If I was in the sprawling living room watching a movie, she'd be curled up on the rug in the center of the room. When I went downstairs to the finished basement to play video games, she would trot down the stairs and lie by my feet. It was in the basement that I first felt that prickle of unease. I was deep into a game when Luna suddenly lifted her head from the floor. She wasn't looking at me or the screen. She was staring intently in the direction of the boiler room, her tiny body as still as a statue. I had dogs before, and I knew they often reacted to sounds humans couldn't hear. Still, her focused gaze was enough to make me pause the game. I looked in the same direction. It was a dark, silent void. My imagination, fueled by years of scary movies, started to run wild. I tried to shake it off, unpaused the game, and kept playing, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. After a minute, Luna lifted her head again, her eyes fixed on the darkness of the boiler room. It was probably nothing, but I was too unnerved to keep playing. I turned off the console and the TV, and sprinted up the stairs, Luna hopping at my heels. I felt a little foolish, a teenager spooked by a dog's gaze, but the feeling of dread was too real to ignore. I went to the main floor's game room, a large, comfortable space connected to the rest of the house by a long, narrow hallway. Luna immediately plopped down at my feet. I played for a while, losing myself in the game, until the late hour finally caught up with me. I headed to the guest bedroom, which was larger and more comfortable than my own room at home. I changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt and slid under the covers, flipping on the bedside TV. Luna curled up on the floor beside the bed, a comforting presence. She had truly grown on me. I finally turned off the TV and fell into a deep sleep. I was jolted awake by a low, guttural growl. My heart began to pound. I turned on the bedside lamp and looked down. Luna was lying perfectly still on the floor, her head low, a deep, continuous rumble coming from her chest. Her eyes were fixed on the closet door. I said her name, but she didn't even look at me. The growling grew more intense, and she slowly stood up, her small body tense and alert, still staring at the closet. She didn't bark, but the intensity of her focus was far more chilling than any sound she could make. I looked at the closet. It was a sliding wooden door, and it was ajar about 3 inches on the left side. It was too dark inside to see anything, but I knew, with a certainty that made my stomach churn, that something was in there. A stupid, reckless curiosity took hold. I had to see. I crept out of bed, tiptoeing toward the closet door, my mind a blank slate of panic and foolish bravery. I got within 5 feet, and as I angled my body, something came into view through the crack that I couldn't see from my bed. It was a person's eye. A single dark eye, perfectly nestled between the wall and the edge of the door, staring directly into the room, and now at me. I screamed, a single sharp sound of pure terror. It was a useless sound. There was no one to hear me but whatever was in the closet. I scooped Luna up and ran for my life, grabbing the emergency cell phone on the counter as I tore out the front door. I dialed 911 as I ran. I didn't bother calling my aunt and uncle. It was 1 a.m. and they were far away. The police arrived quickly. They did a full sweep of the house and found someone hiding in the pantry closet downstairs. I never saw him. An officer kindly kept me outside and distracted me with questions to calm me down. The relief I felt was overwhelming. I was allowed to go back inside, knowing I was safe and alone, with Luna in my arms. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I know one thing, that without that little dog, I might not have woken up to see the morning. It was a cold, bitter December in rural Vermont. My friend was away, and I was doing him a favor, watching his dog, a large German shepherd named Chester. The cold was unbearable, but in the Vermont countryside, our yards weren't fenced. It was an unspoken rule that you had to walk your dog, or it would disappear into the woods. My friend had left me an old, frayed, blue leash. When I hooked it to Chester's collar, the dog instantly tugged, pulling me toward the front door with an aggressive, excited energy. This was going to be a chore. The cold hit me like a physical blow the moment I stepped outside. The wind was biting, and the air was so frigid it felt like I was breathing in tiny glass shards. I started to jog a little, just to get some blood pumping. Chester was happy to oblige, pulling me down the dirt road. We ran for a bit, until he suddenly stopped, his nose to the ground, sniffing at the base of a tree. I thought he was about to do his business, but then he perked up, his ears straight, and stared off into the black abyss of the woods. A low growl rumbled in his chest, and then a deep, booming bark echoed through the trees. He began to pull, his powerful body trying to yank me into the woods. I held on with all my strength, my hands freezing, but the old leash was too weak. It snapped at a frayed point, and Chester was gone, a blur of dark fur disappearing into the trees. His barking faded into the distance until all I could hear was the wind whistling through the trees. I called his name, my voice desperate, running a few feet into the woods before I stopped. It was pitch black. My phone's flashlight was a useless pinprick of light against the oppressive darkness. I knew I couldn't find him. He would have to come back on his own. I stood there shivering, calling his name over and over. Then I heard it, the snap of a twig nearby. Footsteps. My heart leaped with hope. It was Chester. The sound grew louder, closer. But as it got closer, I realized it was all wrong. The footsteps were too heavy, too slow, too deliberate. They were the sound of 2 feet, not 4. It wasn't a dog, it was a person. Panic took hold. I turned off my flashlight and stood perfectly still. The footsteps seemed to be circling me, a slow, methodical rhythm in the darkness. My mind raced. Had they seen me? Were they just a hunter, or something worse? I began to tiptoe, moving as silently as I could, back toward the road. I was covering good distance when the footsteps simply stopped. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. I relaxed my movements, thinking they had gone, and walked a little faster. I had been so focused on the sound behind me that I wasn't looking ahead. I walked directly into something. A large, dark shape. I stopped, my heart in my throat, and put a hand to my mouth to stifle a cry. I was standing less than a foot away from the back of a person. They had a large hood on, and they were perfectly still, a silent, menacing statue. I took a chance. "Have you seen my dog?" I asked, my voice a shaky whisper. They didn't move. They didn't turn around. The silence was deafening. My fear was so great, my brain went into a disassociated state. I reached out a hand and put it on their shoulder. It felt hard, cold, and strangely wooden. My heart stopped. I walked around the figure and shined my phone's light on its face. There was no face, just a long stick holding the hood up. It was a dummy. A fake. That meant whatever had made those footsteps was still close by. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I ran. I ran faster than I ever had, back to the dirt road and up the hill to my friend's house. I never went back for Chester. He never came back. I had to tell my friend what happened, and I expected him to be angry. He was. He hated me after that, and I can't blame him. That night, I had a nightmare. I was in my room and I heard Chester's barks from the woods. They weren't a confident bark anymore. They were a scared, whimpering cry. I woke up and looked out the window, hoping it was real, but the woods were silent. I don't know what happened to Chester. I don't know who put that dummy in the woods, and I'm not sure I ever want to know. My neighbor was a strange, reclusive woman. She was elderly, antisocial, and had an intense, almost obsessive love for her dog, a small, white bacon fries named Hazel. When she had to go visit family across the state, she practically begged me to watch the dog. The price was right, so I agreed, but she immediately began to scold me, listing off a long, detailed set of rules for caring for Hazel. She was so insistent that I stay at her place instead of taking the dog to mine. She had a spare bedroom with nothing but a twin bed and a desk in the corner. The dog Hazel was a nightmare. It was small, yappy, and incessant. It barked at every little thing I did, a high-pitched, grating sound that drove me crazy. I had planned to bring over my Xbox, but I quickly discovered her television was so old it didn't even have an HDMI port. So I spent the evening doing nothing but playing games on my phone and listening to Hazel's endless yapping. Around 8 p.m., I fed her and decided to do a little snooping. The woman's bedroom door was ajar, despite her warning me to stay out. I crept inside. The furniture was just as ancient as the TV. In the middle of the room was a large, rectangular rug with strange, ornate Indian patterns. The room felt eerie and heavy, and I didn't stay long. By 9 p.m., I was exhausted from the dog's constant noise. I decided to go to bed early, hoping to drown out the noise with sleep. I assumed Hazel was sleeping in the woman's room. I didn't really care. I just wanted the night to be over. I woke up in the middle of the night, not to a normal noise, but to the muffled, frantic barking of Hazel. It was constant, a desperate sound that seemed to be coming from somewhere deep within the house. I got out of bed, my mind trying to make sense of the sound. It sounded like it was coming from a basement, but I had never seen a basement door in the house. I followed the sound, and to my horror, I realized it was coming from the owner's bedroom. My heart pounded as I pushed the door open. The room was dark, but the moonlight from the window was enough to illuminate the floor. The large rug was no longer in the center of the room. It had been rolled up and pushed into a corner, revealing a wooden trapdoor in the floor. The door was open, revealing a dark, gaping hole. Hazel's barking was definitely coming from down there. A paralyzing fear took hold of me. Hazel, a small, puffy dog, could not have rolled up that rug and opened that door. Something had opened it, and something had taken her. I was about to run, to sprint out of the house and back to my own, but I couldn't leave her. I crept to the edge of the opening, my voice a shaky whisper as I called her name. The barking stopped instantly. The silence was deafening. I waited for her to come running up the stairs, but she didn't. Instead, a hand came out of the darkness below, grabbing onto the side of the opening. It was the hand of a man. I had a split second to make a decision: fight or flight. I was a 15-year-old kid. I chose flight. I ran for my life out the front door and to my parents' house. I woke them up, screaming about what had just happened. My dad called the police and reported a break-in next door. The police arrived quickly, and I described what I had seen. They went into the woman's bedroom, but the rug was back in its place, covering the trapdoor. The officers, who seemed skeptical, still investigated. They moved the rug and found a large crawl space with a bunch of strange objects, but there was no sign of a person or of Hazel. The next day, when the neighbor returned, my dad confronted her. She had a hysterical breakdown, ranting about how the demons below her had been making noises for months. She then started sobbing over her dog. I haven't spoken to her since. She rarely leaves her house, and I'm okay with that. To this day, the thought of that open trapdoor and the hand that came out of the darkness fills me with a cold, creeping dread. I don't know who was down there or what they did to Hazel, and I don't think I ever want to find out.